Hello everyone, it's Jin'taan here, and today I am talking to EQ, the man so amazing he only needs two letters to his name. And he's a director in Streamfleet, and his most notable accomplishment and the way you should know him is that if you watched a single second of any of CCP's streams for the entirety of the World Tour in 2019, he was the person in charge of the pictures that entered your eyeballs. He was the producer, the director, and involved in most of the planning that went behind it as well. So say hello to everyone.
Greetings. It's a pleasure to be here.
So just to give the audience some sort of an idea of how much went into the World Tour and your streaming of it, how many actual days of streaming did you produce?
So in total, in just like napkin math, it comes up to 9 days of streaming, which is like the total of all the days that have been streamed during the Invasion World Tour.
Having been to these events in person, though, I know that for a fact it's not just about the days you're actually live, because so much goes into stuff before that can even happen. So do you want to give the audience some idea of what goes on to make a stream of a live event even possible to begin with?
Yeah, so a lot of the work goes into the background of actual like player gatherings, but not obviously in the event itself as much as the live stream portion of it. And this involves a lot of time and work put into the planning, at least a month before the event itself. And during the World Tour, basically we had an event every month. So that meant that we were on call with CCP basically every week. Some days just to touch base and make sure everything that needs to be sorted is sorted. And sometimes it would be, long discussions about how we want to do a particular part of the event. And basically, those conversations were mainly for CCP to get certain equipment sorted or get a certain, creative or program decision pulled through. So usually CCP would make like timetables for the live stream, and they would sometimes, give us the draft of it so that we kind of give also our point of view on certain sequences, or maybe we can add content somewhere else, or maybe this guest would make more sense somewhere else and stuff like that. So we kind of look at the details of it and make sure that it's as entertaining as possible. So that's kind of the stuff that goes into it before the event itself. And then going to the actual event, we usually end up being there like 2 days at least before the event. On some occasions, we had only 1 day before the event, which was horrible. I think in some cases, no, we didn't have a case where we would straight up go there and start working, or I think it might have happened in Sydney. But generally, we are there 1 or 2 days before the event just to make sure all the shipments of equipment are there, start preparing the computers, making sure that all of the equipment which is available works as intended. Sometimes we even make a test live stream a day before just to make sure that the internet connection is stable enough, that our equipment is working as intended. And that's sort of the stuff that goes on, before the event itself. And then obviously during the event, it's basically me sitting behind the many screens, running OBS and controlling the stream itself while being in communications with Raiden Harmon and Miss Moses, who are usually the guys that are running around and making sure that things are fixed. For example, sometimes we're going to have bad lighting, or we're going to have a weird camera angle or something like that. That's when I would usually get the walkie-talkie and tell them that we need to fix something, and they're going to get on it. So they're kind of like my remote hands for for the stream itself. But they do a ton of other things next to that during the event itself. So yeah, that's kind of it, I guess.
Equipment. Can you give us some idea of what equipment you're referring to there? You know, what do you actually have to set up? What is required to actually run a stream that is connecting all these cameras together and basically providing a digital view of an entire player gathering?
So the kind of special achievement I want to say that we managed to pull off with the equipment during the World Tour is that we kind of managed to get to use budget-ish equipment, considering, you know, productions like these, to make shows that may or may not look of, you know, comparable quality, let's say. Equipment-wise, this means we always had two really beefy machines that were the main two streaming machines. Well, one of them was used to do the actual stream to Twitch. The second one was there if we had a remote location in the building, or if we needed some video editing done on the spot. So the secondary streaming machine that would be used on a remote location would usually also be connected to a stream server that we bring with ourselves, which is one of the funniest pieces of equipment, because the whole stream relies on that machine working and passing through traffic, and it's just a Raspberry Pi. So it's always kind of funny when we, you know, whip out all the equipment and that's our server. So for all the remote locations, that server is usually used to push the feed through the network from any place inside the building. And then usually we had higher cameras that, you know, like proper cameras, like not DSLRs, that would output with HDMI. And then we kind of used Elgato capture cards for as many cameras as we had in order to get the feed from them into the machine itself. And then with that, obviously, all of the audio equipment, so various lavalier mics, handheld mics, stuff like that for the presenters and like guests in the studio, as well as lighting for the studio mainly, or any other like location that we need to have more lit than others.
And you mentioned sometimes that equipment wasn't working the best it could be. Do you have any like horror stories of having to improvise something or figure out a solution on the fly of how to actually make the stream happen?
Yeah, that's kind of it. I can't even like count how many times a piece of equipment didn't work as intended. I'm pretty sure that at least like that every venue had at least something fail, and that's something that we always prepare for as well. We always have backups for backups. But in Amsterdam, for example, I think we had two higher cameras which were intended for the presentation room, and they were meant as a zoom in camera, which is always centered on the speaker and kind of closed up, and then a wide shot camera that would sort of show the whole stage and the slide on the top. And as we were setting things up, we figured out that that one of the cameras didn't actually have a charger for the battery. So that was the first step. We couldn't even get the camera started. So then after using a different charger, we managed to get it working. We successfully got it to work, and then it just didn't want to send the feed out through the HDMI. So we had to just cut that camera on the spot and just go, this is not going to work. Guess we only have close-up cameras. And this is a common thing, like firefighting and stuff not happening. Sometimes stuff breaks even like 10, 15 minutes before we go live. And it's this kind of split decisions that kind of take away from the stream itself, unfortunately. But, you know, at least there is a stream. So we had that problem. Also in Amsterdam, for some reason, we couldn't get like capture cards working with one of the higher PCs that were available there. Like I was trying everything with that thing in the time frame given. So I ended up just swapping that with my own laptop. and that one was the studio PC. I don't know. Like I said, like every single venue that we came to, there was always at least something that didn't work quite right and caused us a lot of headaches. But as as the events progressed, so starting in Amsterdam, if you look at the production quality there, and if you look at the production quality for Vegas or for Berlin, for example, you can clearly see improvements, and that's sort of our team figuring out the nooks and crannies of this sort of stuff. Like what do we need backups of? What do we need to make sure that it works before going live? So more checks, more I don't know, tests, stuff like that. So by the end, by Vegas, we were all like a well-oiled machine, and we just came in there, started testing things, made sure everything was running. And I think it really reflects in the stream itself.
I really enjoyed, obviously, all the streams of events that I couldn't make it to. Some of the announcements were things you couldn't miss, and it was great that everyone got to see, all of what CCP had to say. With that said, though, I want to move on to a slightly different subject, though, which is the venues themselves. All of them felt super different, and I'm sure they all had their own challenges. I remember when we were in Germany, you guys were running cables like up through a skylight and across like a rooftop into another room. Like, how did that come about?
Well, Germany always seems to kind of give us some really interesting logistical challenges. This year, or during the World Tour, rather, the the event was held in two buildings, which were actually touching each other. Like it was like one house, but it's actually two separate buildings. Whatever. The point is that we had all the networking equipment in the main building where the presentation room was and where the streaming PC was. And then in the second building was the PvP arena. So there was no other way of running the network cable other than through a window in the ceiling of one building and then get it through the ceiling window of the second building, which is also where our studio was. So yeah, that one was kind of funny.
Can you think of any other particularly funny, like, behind-the-scenes moments that you think the audience might want to hear about?
Oh, yeah, there's like... I think my favorite would be from Berlin. But, yeah, it was this year or during the World Tour, where we had an interview going on in the studio, and we had no way of showing or telling them a topic or a comment. I think we were pulling a comment or a question from Twitch chat, and I was in the studio running the stream, and Raiden was next to me, and we were obviously silently talking, like, how the hell should we do this? So I ended up passing him a piece of paper, and he wrote the question onto the paper. Oh, no, actually, I wrote it because people were really complaining about my handwriting afterwards. So I wrote down the question and the username of the person asking, and I gave it to Raiden, and Raiden went full, like, soldier mode. He dropped down on the floor on like his belly and crawled underneath the table, and he just extended his hand up. So if you watch the live stream, there's just a hand that randomly pops up with a piece of paper. And then I think Ithaca was the host there. He took the piece of paper like it was, he was obviously, he got the bit. So he kind of just played along with it. And then I kind of took pictures when Raiden was going back, because he was just crawling on the ground all the way around. That was particularly funny for sure.
So how did you get into this in the first place? How did you learn how to produce streams or even find yourself in this role to begin with?
For me, it started, I think it's 5 years ago at this point. I was just randomly watching Twitch, nothing particular, I guess. And it was back then that I first even started watching EVE Online on Twitch. So I was watching the streamers. I enjoyed a lot of them, and in particular, I was watching the Event TV back then because it had a lot of great streamers. It was very entertaining. There was a lot of viewership and a quite strong community. So at some point, I just poked Rain Chocolate, who was streaming on the Event TV back then as well, and I just asked her, like, I'm really interested in this. Can you give me some pointers onto, how I can be a streamer? I felt like I'm entertaining. I feel like I could do this, and it looks like a lot of fun. And she just straight up threw me into the Event Slack. We still used Slack back then, and just gave me a timetable and just went like, yeah, just pick a time slot you want to stream in, and you're good to go. So I think I streamed like solo PvP frigates, faction warfare stuff for like 4 months or something like that. I was on like every weekend. And during that time, Tyrandian Biohazard, the main producer or streamer, like event streamer like me from Event, was having some issues managing his time. So for a lot of the competitive content, Event needed a streamer. So that's when Bayard J, the head of Event, approached me. He was like, "Are you interested in doing this?" So I was like, "Yeah, sure." in most cases, like when I join an organization, I just tend to go to the role that is missing and then try to master it. So that's kind of what happened here. I was like, yeah, totally, get me on board with that. So I talked to Tyrandian Biohazard. He showed me the grips. And then I streamed for Event for 2 years, which included the Alliance tournament. And that was, I think that's still kind of the highlight of at least the competitive streaming part of my career. Going to Nottingham for 1 weekend, and then the next year I went for 2 weekends, because the first time that they gave us the stream, we only streamed the first 2 weekends of the Alliance tournament, and then the year after that we had the whole Alliance tournament. So the first year I only was there for 1 week for both of those 2 streams, and then the second year I was streaming the first 2 weekends of the Alliance tournament, and Tyrandian Biohazard did the second 2 weekends. So that was kind of the, I guess, esports Eve highlight of my life, and that was a lot of fun times had with the guys in Nottingham. But like after 2 years, the content kind of stagnated a little bit. People lost motivation a little bit, and it was around that time that Miss Moses reached out to Event and said, we want to do the first Valkyrie tournament and need someone who could stream that. So they pointed her to me. And I remember back then at first I rejected it because my life was in shambles during those few weeks that they requested it. And I was like, I don't need anything right now. And then when I kind of got back to my senses, I was like, yeah, I'm so sorry for saying no to this. I'm totally down. So that was kind of my first interaction with Raiden Harmon as well as Miss Moses. And we made that stream happen. And then right after that, Raiden approached me directly and was like, do you want to help me make this community-driven live stream event? I think it was the first streamer death race. And that's how it basically started. I just, from that moment on, I learned more and more and more because we kind of needed it. So the streaming tech, how to make a stream server, I don't know, optimizing the streaming stuff, like all of that I kind of learned in, like, let's say the first year of being in Streamfleet, just by doing it a lot. Same goes for graphics design and video editing, which I do for Streamfleet. Like most of it I've learned by just, having random tasks given to me in Streamfleet. Well, that's not so much random. It's more like Raiden has an idea. Moses figures out the plan, and then I execute on it. So I'm going to make all the graphics and the videos and stuff like that. And obviously out of that necessity, I sort of learned all the stuff that I've learned from just doing that a lot.
Yeah, I suppose we should actually talk about some of those Streamfleet-driven non-CCP events as well, because, you know, I know that you were the driving force behind getting completely technologically incompetent people like myself to be involved in the charity streaming marathon for Take This, a mental health charity. What were some of the challenges of that, if you don't mind me asking?
I think the biggest challenge was opening up the stream and seeing something not being done the way you instructed people. Because yeah, it's a little bit frustrating, but I try to be as understanding as possible. It generally, I think it's the second time that I've made like a graphics pack for all the streamers and gave them instructions on how to set things up. And the hardest part when you're doing something like this is that you have to consider that streamers have different preferences to their screen layout, to their graphics, to all of that stuff. And we try to disrupt it as least as possible, which is why you have to make graphics that can work for as many people as possible. So obviously we're still going to ask people to put the right graphics onto their stream because it's needed for the charity stuff. But we still try to give them as much freedom as possible. So I ended up making graphics for whenever you have, you know, your webcam on top left or your top right corner. So people have a choice to which one of those they want and stuff like that. So I ended up writing up like a PDF document with instructions to, you know, how we recommend people do it. But you can obviously still just take pieces of that tutorial and, you know, make it happen, which I'm happy with some streamers. I was really happy with how some streamers pulled it off, and I was a bit disappointed with others that I expected would, you know a little bit better onto how to make the stream look good.
So what has doing all of this over, like you said, nearly 5 years now taught you? And do you think you've taken away a lot of positive development as a person from it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, besides the fact that I got to meet so many EVE players from so many different communities, like that by itself is, you know, I feel blessed for the fact that I got to experience that. But it's also just the fact that you learn so many things about planning, just planning in general, planning your life, planning an event, planning, I don't know, just planning in general. But like Miss Moses is really good at, you know, making them spreadsheets and putting people in the right places for things to happen. So for me, it was a learning experience from that end to, you know, how to interact with people in certain ways, you know, in a professional environment, how to make sure that there's no conflict, how to make sure it's stuff like that, even though it sounds like simple things. But once you're in a very volatile environment, like you're live streaming and stuff, you know, you gotta keep chill and make sure that people are as comfortable as possible, because they're more likely to do things correctly and not stress about it. And of course, I've learned a lot from Raiden, because he's like, he has ideas. He just comes up with ideas. Like, he's an idea machine, and he's a very creative person in that sense. And he really, really cares about the streaming community. So I don't know about anyone else who, you know, has this amount of passion for the stream community of EVE Online, and coming up with new ideas and fresh stuff to do every year with all of these people, to me was always very, you know, inspirational. It's amazing how much he cares about that. And just overall making a lot of, you know, connections around the world. Like, I've met a lot of the streamers from England and from America and stuff like that. And we made some wonderful connections with these people. And that's, like, I think it's priceless, especially when you randomly meet at an event like that. And sometimes you're going to meet people like yourself that are like I'm going to drop whatever it is that I'm doing because you guys look like you need some help. And we've had that experience with quite a few people from the Streamfleet community that were at events as well, that like we had a community that was so strong that we could just, ask somebody that's there, and it's their time, it's their free time, they're enjoying themselves, and we don't want to disturb them. But some of them see when we are in distress, and they approach us and just go in there and go like, you guys look like you need some help. How can I help you out? And getting connections like that, and how to find them, and I guess you could say networking, is also another thing that I feel like was amazing in this year.
What are you looking forward to doing in 2020 as this year starts to get rolling?
Currently, the thing I'm most looking forward to is Twitch versus Eve, which is coming up for us, and after that, I'm obviously looking forward to FanFest, which I am going to, and it's going to be great. Like, based on all of the stuff that they've laid out so far, based on all of the stuff that they advertised, I think it's gonna be a really good one. And like, they're coming back from a year of pause, and I think FanFest 2018 was kind of, I don't want to say boring, but I felt like there wasn't really that much of a FanFest charm to it compared to previous years. Like, I was there in 2013 and 2017, and both of those were great. But some of the content I felt like was sort of running out. And this is the part that I'm more curious about for this year's FanFest, because during the World Tour, they kept revealing the same stuff on every event, because they said, we're changing the way we're communicating with the players, and we're keeping you more up to date with things we're planning to do. So it makes me curious what they're going to bring to presentations this time that is going to be, interesting and different, given that the community knows about most of the changes. I expect them to drop some really, really interesting news, since they are apparently putting quite a bit into this event.
I'm still not sure if I'm going to be watching that from home or being there in person, but I'm glad to hear that I'll enjoy it either way. Anyway, if someone was, after all of this, looking to get into streaming Eve, do you have any suggestions of places that they could go to find resources or get help kind of breaking into it? Because there's people are always, posting on our Eve looking for new streamers to follow. There's obviously a demand for that kind of content.
Yeah, so I would say if you want to stream Eve, I think one of the main things you have to get accommodated to is how the world of Eve Online actually works when you're live streaming, because it feels to some extent like a different game, just based on the fact that it's really hard for you to hide yourself. It's hard to be OPSEC and not get, destroyed on the way. I'm not going to say stream sniped. I feel like that's a bit of a no-no word, but it's one of the things that you should be cautious of. Don't be too cautious about it, because if you throw too many graphics onto that screen to try and cover up where you're at, you just make it a challenge, and the stream's not going to look really good. So I would say that's one of the things that every Eve streamer should consider before they start live streaming. Other than that, I would say you can live stream even on something that isn't the strongest PC ever. There's a lot of sort of, problems, I guess, that people think they need a really, really strong machine in order to live stream. And at this point, with current technology and stuff like that, you honestly don't really need that much. So I feel like a lot of people are sort of holding back because they feel like they might not have the right equipment for it. But honestly, if you want to get experience live streaming and you feel like you're entertaining and you feel like you have good content, you don't need to live stream at 1080p. You can choose to live stream at 720p if that's what your network allows, If your stream is stable at that, then stream at that. That's it. It's about the viewers enjoying it, and if you choose to go at higher quality than you're capable of, it's going to look bad. So it's everyone can stream, and you don't have to really worry that much about the hardware. And there's a ton of tutorials on the internet about this. There's an OBS subreddit. You have a ton of tutorials on YouTube, how to set up your OBS, how to set up the graphics, how it works, and stuff like that. And as far as the like graphics to make your stream look better, there's a lot of graphics packs out there that are fairly cheap, and they have everything in there that you're going to need for your stream to look more interesting. So that's kind of all the stuff that we also help out our streamers in Streamfleet. So if you want more help, if you want more advice, if you want people who are also doing EVE live streaming to watch your live stream and give you feedback, then join our community. We have a public Discord link on our homepage, streamfleet.org, and anyone can join in there. So you can just drop in there and poke people, ask for help. There's absolutely nothing wrong with doing that, and everyone learns that way. There's a lot of people that might think they know everything, and you're going to ask a question and they're going to learn something new. So it's a network in knowledge sense as well. We teach each other and we help each other improve by giving suggestions. Like, I'm going to watch someone's live stream and I'm going to be like, your camera could be so much better if you did something like this, or you can add this sort of thing to your stream to make it more interesting. So we already have this kind of network, but also you get news about upcoming events, which obviously is priceless.
Thank you for coming along. Do you have any final comments that you'd like to make before we close this out?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to Streamfleet altogether and the EVE stream community in general. There's compared to when I started doing all of this and looking at it today, there's been so much development. Like, we have so many more streamers. Most of those streamers, they look great. Their streams look proper, and they have a lot of followers as well and viewership. So to the streamers of EVE Online out there, thank you for being there, and thank you for making this happen. It's great, and keep at it. And at the same time, I'm really glad that Twitch is starting to actually get into EVE Online itself. Like, the fact that players know of it and look for it, that's also obviously a great sign that we're doing a good thing, that all of the streamers are in fact doing a good job at growing the community and improving themselves and others.
All right, well, thank you once again for your time spent in this interview. A special thanks, as always, has to go out to our Crassuses, Brood from Triumvirate, Zolka Lando, and Jessica, as well as to our other $5 and above patrons in January Valentine, Big Bada Boom, Zar, Dunk Dinkle, Miss Moses, Kem, the Ashfell Federation, Closer Canty, Crazy Daisy, and Ulrich Bluthers. If you want to join them in supporting the channel, you can either check out the Patreon link in the description below, or if you'd like, just share the video with some other people who you think might enjoy it. Until next time, have a good day and fly smart.